Hello, my fellow Almontians, and welcome back to another broadcast from the bunker. I had a bunch of requests to go over this lab. Some of you guys are having a little hard time with it, so I'll go through it. We'll keep it short. A quick reminder about the homework. The textbook pages were 298 to 313, looking for 15 bullets. All right, so get that to me ASAP. All right, so with the landscape lab, again, please refer to the previous lesson on landscapes. I go into a lot more detail, but I'll recap a few things here. All right, there's New York State, of course. We're right around there, right? There's Elmont. And the different colors here are representing not only different landscapes, but also different elevations. And you'll notice, we're in a plain, like we said, the Atlantic coastal plain, so we shaded that green, right? It's a low area. The Adirondacks are the mountainous region. They should be more reddish. And your plateaus, your middle elevation, are more yellowish. So this chart blends the colors a little bit. I'll clear that up for you on the lab in a moment. But just kind of a good view of that. Now, the reference tables has the same map, only without the colors, right? It gives you the landscape names. And you, of course, had to figure out what's high, what's middle, what's low. You can overlay this map, of course, with the bedrock geology map, right? It tells you the type of rock that's in each landscape. And that was a part of the lab as well. You had to figure out a certain place in New York. You go down to the key, you figure out the geologic age, which are these names here. Some of them sound a little funny. And then you slide over and it'll tell you what type of rock it was. Okay? Part one on the lab, basically you had to go through what was, high, middle, low elevations and shade them in. I had done a few of them for you, and I'll bring up the lab in a second, but this should be all colored in at this point. For the list here, you're simply figuring out what these names are, right? So A, for example, right in here, that's your Allegheny Plateau. Let's see, where's B right up here? B, that would be your Erie, Ontario lowlands. Now, where am I getting that from? Well, you got to go back to here, right? Erie, Ontario lowlands, Allegheny Plateau, and you had to relate this map to this list here. Okay? For the next part, it asked you to label the rivers and basically to find the rivers, right? What kind of intricate network going on there? Well, just simply go back to this chart, because if you look closely, all the rivers are here, right? There's your Niagara River, the Hudson everybody knows, your Susquehanna down here, and that's what this list was here. So you had to label the different rivers that you found on the map. All right? And, of course, the summary questions. So let me bring up the lab itself, and I'll go through a couple of the parts there. I'll fill in a few more for you if you need a little more helping hand, and hopefully you guys can submit that very soon. Okay. One second. What happened here? Okay, that's a little better. All right, so this is the copy I sent you guys. This first area was shaded red, right? That was the Adirondack Mountains. That's your highland. And again, go to your reference tables, right? Use this chart right here, and it'll tell you Adirondacks. And then, of course, you fill in the appropriate color. Red was for the highlands. Yellow was for your middle elevation, your plateaus. And we said green for the lower elevations. So I'll pick out a couple of lowers here. Let's see. That would be like Elmont. Up here is another lowland. And here is a lowland. Right over here as well. But anyway, this should be all colored in with the exception of the lakes, of course. But all these other landscape areas should be shaded the appropriate color. All right? Okay. Go down to the next page here. I did that one for you. The second one, it says, in the Atlantic Coastal Plain, Area F, what is the bedrock type and age? So if I scroll down, Area F is over here. It wants to know what the bedrock type and age is. So what chart do I have to go to? Well, I got to go back to the reference table chart where it has that information, which is right here. So there's your Atlantic Coastal Plain. You can see the pattern is kind of speckled and dashed. So if I go over to the key, speckled and dashed, right here it says Cretaceous and Pleistocene. So that's going to be the time periods, you're right. And then it says what type of rock. Well, we don't have bedrock on Long Island. We're a pile of loose sediments that was deposited here by a glacier. So you could say loose sediments, or you could, fill in whatever it says in the key there. Usually on the side it'll tell you what type of rock, but in this case, again, we're mostly a loose pile of sediments. Okay, so that's what's going on there. For this part here, the drainage systems, again, how do I figure out where these are? Well, I got to go to the reference table. So let's say I'm looking for, I don't know, let's see the next one down here, the St. Lawrence. Well, I don't know what letter that is, so I'm going to go back to my reference tables. And I'm going to look closely on this map for the St. Lawrence, and if I look carefully, there it is, all the way up here in the north, the St. Lawrence River. Okay, so that's the position. So now I go back to the lab, and I say, well, that's got to be right around there, so that's letter F. And for St. Lawrence, then, I would write in letter F. All right, I'll do one more with you. The Niagara River. Well, again, it's not labeled on here. I got to go back to my reference tables. I'm looking for the Niagara River. I look all over New York State. And if I zoom in, there it is. There's your Niagara River. Interesting fact about the Niagara River, it flows north, right? Everybody thinks downhill is south. We talked about that the other day. No, the Niagara River, just like the Nile River, flow north. So the water from Lake Erie goes into the Niagara River, dumps over Niagara Falls, right? That gorgeous place. And then it flows north, which is downhill in this part of the country, into Lake Ontario. Okay, but in any event, so I go back to the lab, the Niagara River. Well, that was somewhere in here. All right, so if you put C, I would understand, but technically it should be D. So the Niagara River, where were we here? We would put a D right there. All right, I hope that makes a little more sense to you. The next set of questions, it asks you what's draining into what. Well, what body of water does watershed A drain into? So look closely at A. A is this area here. Well, what river was that? You've already labeled it. So that would be your Hudson, which eventually drains down into the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, watch out for the sharks there. You would say Hudson/Atlantic Ocean. What if I'll do one more here? What major river system is in watershed D? So I go back to the map. Watershed D is over here, and that's where we just pointed out, right? That's the Niagara Falls area. So that, again, is your Niagara River, and eventually that will flow north, like we said, into Lake Ontario. Okay? So finish those up there. For your analysis questions, I'll run through some of them with you. What regions in New York State show evidence that uplift was dominant? Well, if uplift is dominant, you're going up. You got to be a high region. You got to be a mountainous region. So you got to be, what are the mountainous places in New York, right? Your Adirondacks, your Taconics, etc. How many major drainage systems are there in New York State? Well, go back to the map and count them up. How many managed drainage areas are there? Okay. The third one, what do you think caused the development of different drainage systems? Well, remember, you're talking about something massive that would carve out New York State, carve out the rocks. We're pretty far north, right? So the Ice Age did affect us, right? Glaciers certainly carved our state. And also the constant flow of running water also continues to carve out the state. So either one would be, an acceptable answer there. Number 4, what landscape would you look to find the oldest bedrock? Well, how do you find the age of the bedrock? Well, go back to this chart. And a little tip for you, in this key, the further down you go, the older it gets. So find the pattern of the oldest, go back to New York State. In this case, we'll say Middle Proterozoic with these crooked slash lines. And where would that be on here? Well, it's all the way up in the Adirondacks. So that would be your oldest part of New York State. Okay. Number 5, how is it possible that the oldest bedrock is at the highest elevation, right? You would think if it's high up, it would weather and break down. But that means the rock must be very tough. It must be very resistant rock, resistant to weathering, a very hard rock. Well, go back to your chart. It'll tell you what type of rock it is. All right, and in your head, hopefully you're thinking of what kind of rocks are relatively hard. Well, take a look. Gneisses, quartzite, right? Those are hard metamorphic rocks. So they would take a long time to break down. All right, why is it Long Island does not have solid bedrock? Remember, we were pushed here by a glacier, right? We're a pile of sediment, so way, way, way deep down we're resting on bedrock. But for the most part, several hundred feet, we are just sediments on top of the continental shelf. Would it be a good idea to build a skyscraper on Long Island? Well, you guys know the story of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? They tried to build that tall building a while back on very loose sediments, and of course it starts to lean. Same thing on Long Island. If you tried to build a very tall skyscraper, you would get that leaning effect because you're not anchored in solid bedrock. If you head toward towards Manhattan, should I say, you'll notice there is quite a tall building on the way. It's off the side of the LIE, the Citibank building. That's one of those places where they were able to anchor into a solid foundation. But for the most part, most of Long Island, when you try to build up, the structure will start to lean and fall. Okay? For your summary there, explain what factors affect various landscapes. Well, do a little research. What causes valleys, mountains, how are mountains created. Do a little research and write in a nice conclusion there. All right, I hope that was helpful, folks. Polish it up and submit it as soon as you can. This is going to be the 5th, I believe, entry for the 4th marking period. So make sure you're tuning into the portal. Any red exclamation point, right away, make sure you submit it, right? Don't get backlogged. I understand once you get backlogged, it's hard to catch up. So I am going at a relatively slower pace than we did in class because I understand you got a lot of things going on. But please stay on top of your work. When you submit the work, remember, take a picture of it. For labs, obviously, they go right into the Google Classroom. But take a picture of your work for text assignments, Castle Learnings, right? And send me those via Remind or email, and then check the next day to make sure you got the credit. If not, maybe the picture didn't go through because I am updating the portal just about every day. All right? All right, hope you guys are well, and I'll see you soon. Have a good weekend.
That was short.